Okay, a binary big bang, a personified chatbot for every customer interaction, robots that can reason, employees training their own automated partners. What do you think of all this? Love it? Hate it? Somewhere in between. Today, we're going to discuss Accenture's 25th edition of our Technology Vision Research. And joining me today is the leader of that research, who works in partnership with Karthik Narain, our lead for technology and our CTO. Ari, thanks so much for joining us today. We're going to dig into the vision this year. Are you ready?
I'm excited to be here, excited to talk about it.
All right, great. This one's going to be fun. Okay, so each year our technology vision looks ahead to anticipate the major tech trends that will shape business. With the speed of technology today, that look ahead is being applied faster than ever before. So this year, you all looked into AI with the report titled AI, A Declaration of Autonomy. Is trust the limit of AI's limitless possibilities? Tell us a little bit more about your theme this year and the major findings.
Sure. So I think that in general, when we've approached the tech vision in the past, we've really tried to go for a much wider spread of technologies that we've looked at. But this year in particular, what stood out to us in a major way in the research was just the profound impact that AI was having across the board, the way it's allowing businesses to reinvent themselves from the way that they do customer service to the way that they build software. And it felt like this year out of any was something where we had to go very deep into just how profound an effect AI is having. And that kind of brings us to that first major point of the technology vision this year in our overall theme, where we talk about the generalization of artificial intelligence. When you hear a lot of the model developers, who are creating these frontier and foundation models, they talk a lot about artificial general intelligence, the idea of being able to build something that has superhuman intelligence that can do things that people do. And we kind of say, no. The most important thing for business right now is to look at the generalization of that intelligence, the ways that it's being found in everything from our phones to the doctor's office to the tools we bring with us to work, and how AI really has this amplifying effect on everything that it touches. And that amplifying effect, which speaks to the title of this year's vision, is we think it brings autonomy. We hear a lot about digital agents, but it's not just within the digital systems itself that an AI-backed system can now go and take action and things like that. So there's that dimension of autonomy, but we also have different dimensions of autonomy, like me as an individual who can never create artwork before. I can now use AI to do that for myself. I can never have developed code before, but now I can do that as myself. And so it brings a level of access to skills, which allows me as a person to become a little bit more autonomous. And so that's what we think is very exciting in AI, and our trends speak through the spread of that. But one important point on that overall theme is this idea that you cannot have autonomy without trust. We all hear about trust in AI with the deep fakes or use of bad actors, but we really take that a step further to say, how are you trusting AI when you're using it in the ways that you want to be using it? When we are using it for a chatbot, when we are using it to develop ad collateral and things like that, how do you build both the emotional and cognitive trust needed so that these systems can be trusted to operate with autonomy?
And Ari, when you and I were talking about this just the other day, AI, it's interaction with the humans and with the data and with the business that makes it better. So trust is so important because, as you and I chatted last week, right? If you don't trust it, you won't use it. If you don't use it, it won't learn and get better. Then you really won't want to use it.
Exactly.
So you've got to really understand that critical nature of trust on both levels. All right, so you mentioned that the vision always has its themes. There are 4 this year. Can you give the folks watching an idea of what each one of those are? And again, our whole goal here is to give people a little bit of a taste so that they want to spend more time diving into the topics. Tell us about the 4 themes.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be doing my job if I wasn't driving people towards the report. But that said, for as much as I can consolidate our research quickly here and give everybody a little bit of a tease, our first trend is the binary big bang. And that's all about the implications that AI has on software. We're all hearing about co-pilots and agentic frameworks, but we really talk about what happens when that full power is brought into the realm of software and the way that it really upends a lot of the preconceived notions we have around how the digital world works. Jill, when you and I were talking, I mentioned how it's almost this industrial revolution moment for AI or within software, that anybody who couldn't code before can now become a coder. Anybody who didn't know how to code can become a 10x coder and really have this amplifying effect, because the way that we've abstracted it to be able to work with technology, the way that it can become more autonomous, really creates this abundance around. And that's why we see it as a big bang. It's this expanding moment for the digital frontiers of any enterprise. So I really encourage everybody to go look at that, because I think it's a huge kickoff point for the other trends that we talk about. The second one we have, which is your face in the future, is all about how so many companies are starting to use these models right now in customer-facing applications, but they're designed to be as generic sounding as possible. There's a lot of good reasons why they were initially designed to be generic sounding, but for companies, and especially companies that have really valuable brands, how do they start to differentiate when they're all using the same few models for that interaction? How do you bring all of the things that makes your personality with your customers, with the public, unique and distinct, so that I know when I'm working with your company, I know that it's you? How do you bring that into this new channel, which is by all means poised to be the next big channel for enterprises everywhere? Our third channel moves into, or our third trend rather, moves into robotics, and what happens when you take these frontier models and start applying them into this field that's been developing for a long time. And some really exciting things happen where, one, you can see robots start to have more contextual knowledge of the world around them. They can become easier to interact with, where if I take a large language model and apply it into a robot, I can now talk to it. I can instruct it in ways that I need to have a pretty deep skill set to do before. And lastly, it gives it more context around the things that you're asking it to do. So if I ask a robot to wash the dishes, I used to need to program out every single one of those steps, but they can now self-prompt and learn to do those things itself. Each of those three aspects creates a really exciting time for robots, where we can apply them, the types of industries that might take advantage of them, and how seamless they fit in with people. And then our final trend is something we're called the new learning loop. And Jill, you kind of alluded to this with what you know, how you segued into this. We're at this really exciting moment where people are adopting AI. They're bringing it into work. They're excited to use it. But we kind of forecast that there's this moment in front of every single enterprise where we've got a pathway forward where we're going to go ahead and keep letting this diffusion happen, and people are going to learn from it, and AI will have the opportunity to learn about the business. But all of that might stop cold if people start fearing the way AI is used. If I have an uncertain career path forward, if I feel like my use of AI is going to make me replaceable in the eyes of the institution that employs me, I might stop using it. And so with the new learning loop, we explore all the different benefits to bringing AI and people closer together, and how we can keep this kind of virtuous cycle between people and machines continuing to grow and continuing to foster a mutually positive relationship, rather than one that's sort of riddled with fear and concern, and that kind of stops and slows not just people's ambitions with AI, but any enterprise trying to reinvent with it also.
Okay, so Ari, you're talking about a significant shift with the way you think about AI in so many different aspects of the business, which leads to a larger question, a larger hypothesis, which is that that business leaders need to think of AI. They just got their arms wrapped around AI and generative AI in terms of point solutions, but now bringing it to the center of the enterprise is a different vision that the vision talks about. Tell us a little bit more about what business leaders should be thinking about.
Sure. So we raised this concept of a cognitive digital brain. And the way that I like to draw the analogy is, 30, 40 years ago, when companies first started exploring the web and the internet and digital technologies, there was a sprinkling here. Maybe I had a website that I put the number for my fax machine on. Maybe I was automating some back-end processes for the business. But it wasn't really a complete and concerted effort to build a digital enterprise. In 2012, we wrote a tech vision called Every Business is a Digital Business, which said basically that each of these parts needs to feed the other. And the same is true with AI. So if we look right now what's happening with AI, I think we are seeing a little bit of that piecemeal approach. We're seeing one model be used for customer service. We're seeing a different type of thing being used to up-level our coders and software engineers. But at the end of the day, the way that it's going to work the best, and sort of the vision that we present around how you can build a top to bottom, front to back AI stack for the enterprise, which we call this cognitive digital brain, is you need to think about all the different layers that are going to feed everything. You have knowledge graphs and contextual knowledge graphs. You have the large language models, the frontier models, but also the fine tuning that's that's happening on top of that, the layer of agentic orchestration that we can do now, and then the architecture and security that's going to support all of that. Once you realize that all of these things are kind of being built in bits and pieces, but that the whole will be so much greater than the sum of its parts, it really ignites this vision of what can I do when I shift an architecture to one that's not just static and built, and these are the applications that we want to use, but one that is built natively from the ground up for this technology, which is defined by its ability to learn and grow over time and be based on sort of inference and the intention of the user, not just necessarily a direct instruction the way we're used to working with it. And so I think over time, we're going to see these being built. Right now, we see them being built definitely in the enterprise. We see efforts for sovereign AI that are sort of mirroring the same kind of effort at different countries. And we even see it kind of on a personal level where people are starting to ask questions around, well, what's my assistant going to be? Who's it going to be working on behalf of? How do I make sure that everything from the data layer all the way up to the cognitive layer is going to be working on my behalf using my data in a private and secured manner? And so I think that's really the exciting thing. We sort of detail the limbs or the pieces of it through our trends this year in the vision, but the whole that you'll read right up front is this cognitive digital brain concept.
Yeah, and that's it. This is the opportunity for reinvention. Because if you truly are embracing the concept of reinvention, thinking about working fundamentally differently, and a proposition like this, it could be the superpower you need to power your enterprise in a completely different way.
It's so true. It's hard not to recall sort of, the cloud native companies that came up and really sort of shook up everybody. You see what Uber did with taxis and things like that. And those early moments where people are like, well, if we build this natively, like there are startups right now out there thinking, how do we build a startup natively based on AI? And I think that's the major wave that we're about to see. And so this cognitive digital brain concept, exactly that. How do you reinvent for what tomorrow's enterprise demands are going to be from your workers, for your customers, and everything top to bottom? You're going to need that layer of intelligence in it. So how do we build it from the ground up?
Love that. All right, Ari, now we're entering into my personal favorite part of this broadcast, which is working so often as I do with you and other researchers. You go into these things with certain hypotheses, certain expectations in your mind. You can't help yourself, especially something like the vision, which we've done for 25 years running. What surprised you this year as you pursued the vision, the theme, and the various chapters?
Yeah, I was warned about the question, so I had a quick chance to think about it. But so I'll say this. I think that leading up and sort of even through COVID and things, we were seeing a lot of, tech lash, or we called it in a vision a couple years back, tech clash, and the tension between people and technology. And so I think that I was anticipating seeing more of that. But one really surprising finding is that we found people who used AI were 5 times more likely to like the technology if they were familiar with it. So essentially saying that people who got more familiar with the technology liked using it even more. And that was a little bit unexpected. There were, conversations around when people use it, then you get scared of it and run away. And it's not just that we were surprised by the finding, but how strong that correlation was between people using it and how much they were willing to use it in the future. And I think that's really exciting when we think about the speed and trajectory enterprises need to start adopting this technology. The answer is you need to get it in people's hands. You get it in people's hands and they're going to start liking it so much more. And I think that was such a amazing finding. The other one that really surprised me was robotics. When we first started about it, we were seeing some things happening in the field. We were seeing some things happening with LLMs. We're like, we really like this, but it feels further out. And then, I had the opportunity to be at CES last week where we launched the Tech Vision and had some really great conversations. And even, the NVIDIA keynote that happened there was featuring robotics. When I walked the show floor, there were robotics and exoskeletons everywhere. So I think what was surprising about that one wasn't just, that it was happening, because we were sort of anticipating it, but treating it as this one that was far out. I think I was surprised at how quickly that proliferation happened. And I think that speaks again to how rapidly this change is happening, that urgency around the reinvention. Because we sort of discussed this idea, it would be neat if this happened. And we saw some research papers too. We were seeing production level things happening on the floor at CES. And so just that pace, I think, is what shocked me the most through this research process.
Well, and I love that, because that's exactly where we need to be. The vision has to look far enough ahead, but be useful to our clients today. And so we're at a beautiful moment for that, and a beautiful moment for reinvention. If you can take the time to deeply understand where this technology is going and how it will affect the way we run our entities. Thank you so much, Ari Bernstein, the lead of Tech Vision this year. I know that speaking with you and Karthik about this has been fantastic. It's great to see the response to it so far. And for those of you who've joined us for Foresight in 15, want to say a big thank you to you. Please do spend some time with the vision this year. I promise you, you'll enjoy it. It's worth it. Ari, thank you.
Thanks for having me.